In this lecture, we're going to explore some things you need to be careful about if you happen to capture by value and by reference at the same time in your Lambda functions. We're going to look at a few examples here. So we have a bunch of variables A, B, C, and D. And in the first example here, we are capturing A by a value and B by reference. This is going to work. And the compiler is going to generate a functor which is going to have a member variable which is going to be a copy for A and the reference for B. You can test this out in CPP Insights. You're going to see the functor that is generated here. It is also possible to capture all by value and another variable by reference. We can do something like this. This is going to work. Another thing we can do is capture all by reference and a few other variables by value. This is also going to work. So this is no problem so far. And another idea you should really keep in mind is that if you capture all in your Lambda function, the thing you capture all for is going to have to come up first. So for example, if we capture all by value, the equal sign has to come first. If we capture by reference, the ampersand symbol has to come first. So if we do something like this and make the ampersand symbol come last, we will get a compiler error. And if we make the equal sign come last to capture by value, we will have a compiler error as well. So you really need to remember this rule here. If you break it, you're going to get a bunch of compiler errors. Another thing is that we can't prefix variables we capture by value with an equal sign because some people are going to do something like this. This is not going to work. If you do this, you will get a compiler error. You should know this. Another thing some people might try to do is to try and capture by value, for example, after they capture all by value. If you think about this, this is really not making any sense. You have already captured everything, so it doesn't make sense to, again, explicitly try to capture anything else by value because you already have all the data you want. Why would you want to capture C by value again? So the compiler is going to throw a compiler error or a warning if you try to do this. And what you get is going to depend on your compiler. Some compilers are going to give you a warning. Some others are going to give you an error. So you will have to experiment with your compiler. And down here, you see that we have captured all by reference. And we are explicitly capturing C by reference again. So this doesn't make any sense. We are going to get a compiler error or a warning. These are things I want you to be careful about if you happen to capture by reference and by value at the same time in your Lambda function. Now that you know this, we're going to head over to Visual Studio Code and play with this a little more. Here we are in our working folder. The current project is Mixin capturing. We will have to put in our template file. So let's do that. And we will put that in the current project, which is Mixin capturing. So let's do that. And we will open this little guy in Visual Studio Code. This will give us our main CPP file that we want to clean up here. We will set up our first Lambda function, which is going to capture by value and by reference at the same time. In this first example, we will grab A by value and B by reference. This is going to work really well. Let's try and compile and show you that this is going to compile. If you want, you can pass this through CPP Insights to see what the compiler generates for you, and you're going to be able to really explore this and understand this a little more. So this is going to work fine without a problem. The second example is going to capture all by value and A by reference as we see here. This is also going to work without a problem as we have seen in the slides. If we pass this through our GCC compiler, the build is going to be good. And if we run the code, we're not going to see anything because we are not printing anything out. We can bring up a terminal window to try and run this. And if we run this, we won't see anything because our code is really not printing anything in the main function. We can set up another example, which is going to grab all by reference and some other variable by value. This is going to work fine without a problem. So let's pass this through our GCC compiler. The build is going to be good. And now I am going to show you some setups that may give you problems. The first thing we're going to see is that our capture all statements should always come first in our capture list. If we bring them last, we will get a bunch of compiler errors. This is a rule that is enforced in the C++ standard. I don't exactly know why, but you should be aware of this. If you do something like this, you will get a compiler error. And let's see the compiler error that we get. We can pass this through our GCC compiler, and we will see that we expect an identifier before the square bracket here at line 28 in main CPP. If we go here, we will find our lambda function. So this is really not supported. The capture all things should come first in your capture list. You should really remember this. Okay, we can comment this out now that we have seen this compiler error that I want you to be aware of. If we make the capture all equal sign come last, we will also get a same compiler error. So let's try and pass this through our GCC compiler. We will get a compiler error, and we really are not allowed to do this. You should be aware of this. Let's make a comment here showing what we are trying to do. This is code 5 and capture all. Let's copy this. We don't want to type this again. So capture all things. The equal sign and the ampersand have to come first. If you make them come last, you will get a bunch of compiler errors. Now that we know this, we're going to comment this out. The other thing some people might try to do is to try and prefix what they capture by value with an equal sign. And if you try to do this, you will get a compiler error because this syntax here is not supported. So let's try and run this through our compiler and see the compiler error. You see that we will get an error. And this is really not a syntax that is supported. The compiler is going to be confused. Don't do this, or you will get really hard to debug compiler errors in your C++ programs. The last thing I want you to see is that if you either capture by value or by reference and capture everything, you won't be no longer allowed to capture any other variable explicitly, either by value or by reference. So for example, in func7 here, we are capturing everything by value. If later we try and capture C explicitly by value, we will get a compiler error or a warning depending on the compiler that you are using to compile your code. Similarly, if we go to func8 here, we are capturing everything by reference. So we really have no business trying to capture C by reference explicitly again, because this doesn't really make sense. We already have all the data by reference. So why on earth would you try to capture C again? This is why we have a compiler error here. So if we try and build a program, we will get a bunch of compiler errors. And those will be coming from the violations of C++ syntax that we are doing here. If you want your code to compile, don't do this because this is really not allowed. And I want you to really be aware of this. Let's comment this out and make sure our code is compiling. And this is really all I wanted you to see in this lecture. We are going to stop here in this one. In the next one, we are going to explore how to capture the this pointer in our lambda functions if we happen to need to do that. Go ahead and finish up here and meet me there.